to help challenge this kind of situation. There are things that can be done, and so that's why we need, or we have to follow this conversation closely by understanding the idea of fundamental rights, and also getting to understand that there is something that is called your rights as human, and there is something that is called your fundamental rights as human. Now, what would the difference be between your rights, simpliciter, and your fundamental rights? The key difference is in the fact that one is enforceable, while one is recognized because you are human, but then it doesn't have to be enforceable. So we could take an example. I know years ago somebody had, walked up to meet me and then said, "Hey, Tayo, look, I want to enforce my right to know my father. My mom has been taking care of me for years, and she has refused to let me know who my dad is. And then, can you, as my lawyer, help me to enforce my right to know my father?" Yes, I can tell you that, well, naturally speaking, as human, it's morally right, quote and unquote, morally right for him to have the right to know his father. But the question is such right capable of being enforced as a fundamental right? So you begin to relate and understand where we are coming from when we say that not all rights are enforceable. And for a right to be enforceable, it has to be a fundamental right. And how do you now recognize, how do you now realize a right that is a fundamental right? Now, this thing is so simple. And this is where the 1999 Constitution, you'll find it very handy, the 1999 Constitution. This is the basic thing that we will tell everybody, all our listeners, members of our community, to ensure that they get this. If you do not understand any other law, get the 1999 Constitution. And what is about the 1999 Constitution? Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution actually spells out the rights that are considered as fundamental. And when a right is considered to be fundamental, it simply means that you can go to the court of law and start a case on the basis of that right, because it is fundamental. The state, the government, has declared it to be fundamental. The people, rightly said, have declared it to be fundamental. And so it becomes the basis of what you can do in the court of law. And there are a number of rights that are fundamental. This would include right to life, dignity of human person, right to liberty, right to freedom of association, among many other rights. And these are basic things that you need to understand in ensuring that you demand for what is rightfully yours. Now, moving away from the 1999 Constitution, there are also other laws that have been elevated to that position, where you could say, by virtue of this law, I have a right that has become fundamental. So how do you understand these laws? Some of them could be by way of what is called convention. So convention, in other words, could mean the laws of nations, meaning nations have come together and decided that these are basic things that should be enforceable at the domestic level, meaning within their countries. And one of such conventions is what is known as the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. The African Charter on Human and People's Rights is one of such conventions that spell out rights, and in that, the fact that Nigeria has incorporated the Charter as a part of its local laws, then citizens and even non-citizens are able to relate or make reference to the law as a basis for enforcing the content of the law. I hope you find that interesting as we carry on with this. So the next question will now be, how do I enforce my rights once I understand my rights in Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution and other laws that now provides for those rights? To enforce your rights, there is another, so we'll call this like rules governing the enforcement of rights. So once you come under the rights called Fundamental Rights Enforcement Procedure Rules, lawyers will call it the FREP rules, Fundamental Rights Enforcement Procedure Rules. Now, that rule book provides practically how to go about the enforcement of your right. So what you have to do is to understand what Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution says, alongside the procedure for enforcing your rights. Now, the 1999 Constitution actually also stipulates some of this approach in enforcing your rights. For instance, if let's say that something happened, your right was violated, and the occurrence happened between or within two or more states of the Federation, what the law says is that you can actually challenge, you can institute a matter in court for the enforcement of that right, and you can choose to start the matter in any of the states where the violation occurred. So meaning if something had happened and it happened between Lagos, Abuja, Ogun, I may choose to go to any of the courts among these three states where what I am challenging as violating my rights happened. And I hope you find that interesting. Now, moving away from there, it's usually also important for you to engage a lawyer that has an understanding, a wealth of understanding in the field of enforcing human rights for people. So this is critical because you would need to have some form of proof to establish that yes, there was a right that was infringed, there was a right that was violated, and that the right was violated by the person or the institution or the agency that you are taking to the court of law, because the rule is that he who asserts must prove. Meaning, if you are certain that someone has violated your right, you have the duty, you own the duty to establish that indeed the person or the agency or the institute violated the right. So you might need to bring together documents, you might need to write the statement, and as much as possible, take notes of names as well. So for instance, let's say that a law enforcement agency violated your right, assaulted you. Let's use that for instance. Now, if you want to take steps, you want to take action, it might help you on the spot. The moment the assault is happening, you should take a look at the crest. What's the name at that chest? Take a look. Know the name of the officer in question. You can imagine you going on the highway and then an officer harasses you. Just an example, right? And then something happens and you now want to enforce your right, but unfortunately, you didn't even take note of the names of the officers, you didn't take note of the plate number of the ride, I mean their official vehicle, you didn't take note of anything, and then you want your lawyer to perform the magic of suing the law enforcement agency and then leaving it to the law enforcement agency to be the one to start looking for the details of who was on parade, who was on operation at that particular space or that particular location where the alleged assault happened. So the way you can help your lawyer is to ensure that these basic information, you put them together, you take note of them right away so that it becomes easier when the lawyer has to go to the court to challenge and enforce your right for you. And sometimes, right, the process of enforcing your rights has really been simplified by the law, and simplified in the sense that even a dead man, I mean, you can enforce the right of a dead man. Let me just try to use another word. The people that are still alive could still put in effort to ensure that, you know, the dead man's right, because before the death there was a right. Now let's say that the person was shot illicitly by somebody that is a happy gun trigger officer, and then you want to challenge it. Some of you will recall the story of the NSAS tribunals that were set up to look into issues relating to happy gun trigger officers that happen. So, you know, something like that could be the case for you. And so it's so flexible that you don't have to be the one going to court by yourself. Somebody or somebody, I mean, it could be an association that is interested in the case. It could be someone else. It could be an NGO that is into fighting for people's rights. So you would have seen a number of news around NGOs, different NGOs, Amnesty International, this movement, that movement, challenging the government about fundamental rights of people within a locality, of the entire populace, of individuals. So with this kind of explanation you are getting today, you would now understand the very foundation on which their actions are built. The fact that the law allows third parties, NGOs, individuals, different people to really be their brother's keeper. And that's the key word we can use to express what this looks like. It is the era of being your brother's keeper. So in essence, you might know somebody whose right is being infringed and the person is helpless. It might be somebody that is in custody and there is no way the person can have access to any lawyer, and then you are like, you want to be your brother's keeper, you are stepping in for the person. Under the law, you are allowed to be your brother's keeper. And this is a very juicy part of enforcement of fundamental rights, whether for you or for other people that are around you. And then let me speak to something here before we bow out today. The 1999 Constitution really has an elaborate provision that protects the rights of citizens. So you usually find, or if I could read some of these things so as to make it more practical. Now, Section 33 says every person has a right to life. And that's interesting, right? Section 34 says every individual is entitled to respect for dignity of his person. That's interesting. Section 35 says every person shall be entitled to his personal liberty. Another interesting thing. Section 36 also talks about right to fair hearing. And then we go to Section 37, which talks about the privacy of citizens. Quote and unquote the word citizens. So you find that non-citizens, meaning foreigners, are shut out of this provision, the right to privacy and family life. And then you move on again, and then you find different provisions. So we check Section 41. Says every citizen of Nigeria is entitled to move freely. And then you look at it again, something about citizens. Then you go to Section 42, says something about a citizen of Nigeria of a particular community. Now, this is also about a citizen. And then on and on and on. So you find that, in essence, there are rights that are applicable to citizens. And there are those rights that are applicable across board. For those that are foreigners, you might begin to feel discriminated against. There is no need to really feel that way. The saving grace you have is in other laws that are at par at par would mean they are on the same level or the same pedestal with the Constitution, having been exalted to that level. And by virtue of that, the provision of some of these laws also contain these things that we are discussing today, and interestingly even captures rights that are relating to citizens alone. So the meaning is that under those laws, since there is no limitation saying that those provisions or those benefits are only for citizens, it would mean that you are able to get the same benefit even if you can't get it under the 1999 Constitution. You are able to get it by virtue of the other laws, and these laws include the African Charter on People's and Human and People's Rights. So in essence, you can leverage on other laws to ensure that you get what is rightfully yours, because human rights are, they are fundamental, because it's the basic thing that demonstrates that we are human. It's the basic thing that demonstrates that we are a people, and it's the basic thing that also demonstrates that we are on another level different from animals. Imagine animals are locked up, and they could be locked up for days, and then there may not be any law, or there may be no law saying that, look, you have to release this animal. But for us as human, when a human is locked up, the rules, the law says that you cannot even be, your movement cannot be withheld for more than a period of time. And the worst thing that should happen is that you should be entitled to bail. So these are interesting things that makes what we are saying to be practical and to be interesting. So when you have all of this understanding and you've approached your lawyer to guide you on enforcing your rights, or you want to enforce the rights and your lawyer is taking the steps in court, the good thing is that once it comes to court, by virtue of laws, unlike the regular cases that go to court, there is a presumption that enforcing your rights shouldn't be something that will take time. The interesting thing is that we've done cases in court where the judges were thorough, and we were also thorough enough to ensure that there was no delay from us. And we got judgment within 1 month. And this is a plus for the system, and this shows that people can actually get justice within a very short period, especially when they are going through the enforcement of their fundamental rights. So it's something that you should begin to pick interest in, especially if you are a human rights crusader. It's something that your organization or you as a person might begin to look into. So when you work with your lawyer, you file your case in court, you present your case before the court, and then you serve, meaning you send copies of your case to the opposition, maybe to the agency, to the person that has allegedly violated your right, or someone that is violating the right, or someone that is likely to violate the right. Once you do this, the matter will come up in court for hearing. The person will be given the opportunity to also be heard, and then the judge will decide. And interestingly, many people have been compensated by virtue of the fact that the court found that their right was indeed violated. Now, I said something earlier, and there might be a need to clarify that. Another very interesting thing about fundamental rights is you need not wait until your right is infringed. If you have a reasonable basis to suspect that somebody is going to infringe your rights, it can be a basis to go to court. Under the law, speculation is not allowed. But when it comes to fundamental human rights, you are allowed to speculate so far you have reasonable basis to imagine. So in essence, the rule is that your right has been infringed. If your right has been infringed, you can go to court. If your right is being infringed, meaning that it's ongoing, it's an ongoing act, you can go to court. And if your right is likely to be infringed, you can go to court. And I hope you find all of these things interesting and you are energized enough to start considering being a human rights activist, or at least ensuring that you don't allow situations go and then allow them go like those rights are not fundamental to you. So thank you for joining this session. My name is Eitai Ogunyemi, and till we come your way again, please stay tuned to us. Keep learning, keep building capacity, and keep making our country to be better through knowledge, legal knowledge, and legal literacy. Thank you.